You're listening to Exposed by the So Cultured podcast.
We're your hosts, Liv, Yaz, and Taz.
Three girls with a passion for science and tech.
Yep, and welcome to our thrilling new series.
This series, we are taking you on a journey to uncover the truth behind your fave TV shows and movies.
From the intergalactic adventures of Star Wars to the monstrous depths of the Meg.
And the chilling scenarios of zombie apocalypses.
Join us as we question whether these plots could ever happen in real life.
And reveal the scientific inaccuracies hidden on our screens.
And don't worry, we will still be dishing out the laboratea this season with some even crazier listener stories than ever before.
So grab your popcorn for a side of piping hot laboratea.
Before we get into it, remember that all opinions are our own and all our listener stories are alleged.
And now let's get into this week's episode of Exposed. Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 6 of the So Cultured podcast. First of all, we just want to say thank you so much for all of your feedback on season 3 so far. We are so glad that you guys are loving this season. And once again, but if you have any ideas for future seasons, if there's anything that you guys would think would be really fun for us to cover, please drop a comment on any of the episodes, or you can DM us on Instagram at So Cultured podcast. But yeah, we are so glad that you guys are enjoying it so far. And we would also be really interested to know if you guys have revisited or visited any of the films that we've covered so far. And then that brings me on to a question for Yaz and Taz. Guys, what has been your favorite film or series that we've covered? Or what do you think has been the most interesting science behind any of the films that we've covered so far?
That is a good question because I'm a big sci-fi.
Mine is so easy. I have
film.
a straight easy favorite that we've done.
What?
It is The Last of Us. That is ingrained in my brain, and I think that was solid science, and it's just so fascinating to me. So that's my easy answer.
Yeah, true. That was a good one, but it gives me the heebie-jeebies thinking of all the flipping.
Does. And I actually went and YouTubed a few of the scenes, and I get what you mean. The trypophobia hit me hard. It's gross.
But learning about the ant zombies and stuff, or zombie ants or whatever, that was quite cool as well. Definitely enjoyed that episode. I also think the Planet of the Apes one was really cool because again, I'd name my cat Caesar from Planet of the Apes, obsessed. And thinking that the whole premise of the film actually wouldn't have happened because it's kind of the science wasn't there. I think that's also fun to know.
Yeah, I've actually enjoyed a lot of the episodes, to be honest. I think one of the ones that sticks in my mind is probably the Martian episode because of the whole how he made water and because that's wild to me, just because I'm not really a chemist. So the way that worked was kind of crazy. I also did the Jurassic Park episode because I found it interesting that they were trying to bring back extinct species.
Yeah, good point.
Wow, we literally, basically, we just love every episode.
All of every single episode.
We just love everything. But I do feel like being a biologist, aside from being, on the medical doctor side of biology, being a biologist is literally the most sometimes useless science, I think. If you're a physicist or a chemist, I think being a chemist is the most useful. In Breaking Bad, or you said The Martian, their chemistry skills come in so useful, I feel.
Right, I'm going to combat that comment so much because
go on.
We've just had a global pandemic. What do you think the biologists were doing that entire time? Saving the world. That's what they were doing.
Yeah, true. But I'm talking about if you find yourself in an emergency situation where you need to save your life quickly. Yeah. Not a global pandemic where you're in the lab having to fix something and you're doing your job. I just mean if you find yourself in a
day-to-day useful.
Okay, well, as a biologist or an environmentalist, you could, if you're lost in the woods and you knew stuff you could forage, you could find which berries
I could not
eat.
forage. I could not.
Oh, well, anyway.
So being a biologist is potentially useful, and maybe we should all just take up like another hobby. This is actually my question of the week: is if you had to take up a hobby, like, and you could be amazing at it, no matter what it was, what would it be? Like,
I'm saying foraging now because
foraging.
I
Go for
just
it.
can ID one plant. What use is that?
Well, your iPhone
I
can
want to.
ID plants for you. You just take a picture, use lookup on iPhone. Might not be
Yeah,
useful
but
if you're
what
in
if
the
you're in a
wilderness.
exactly and your phone dies?
Yeah, can't rely on iPhone
Don't
then.
rely on technology, Liv.
I always rely on
Use your
technology.
brain.
I think mine, I would want to be like kind of cool, and because I'm in Australia, I think it's quite appropriate because I also just see them all the time. I would want to be like really good at surfing.
Oh my god,
Surfer
knew you were gonna say that.
girl.
Yeah, that would be sick.
You are like a surf. I could imagine you. You're just
Surfer
giving
babe.
those like Australian vibes, like flowy hair, like
Yeah, beach
banging
wave.
beach bod on like on a surfboard,
Oh,
like
Tan.
okay, thanks. I'll take that.
just like. Do you know what it actually reminds me of? You know, H2O, just add water. Did you watch that when you were younger?
Yeah.
Mm.
No, Cleo, the
No, Cleo.
condensation. I actually say that in front of my Aussie colleagues, and they're like, "Oh my god, that's so embarrassing," or they just laugh because it's actually quite a good accent.
I could not surf because when I was on the flight back from New York, I watched this film and I can't even remember what it was called, but I don't know if you guys have seen it. But it's actually about this girl and she's a surfer. So in the film, the girl found this beach and she actually ends up being literally trapped between some rocks and the shore by a shark. And she's literally being like, she watched like two people get eaten by the shark, she gets bitten by the shark, and it's just like this whole thing. So I can't deal with anything like diving, surfing, anything that involves like being near in the water, near dangerous things. Solid no.
Yeah,
Valid.
But yeah, shark attacks, absolutely not.
Well, speaking of shark attacks, we are going to take a deep dive, get it?
Ooh.
Into exposing the Meg. Okay, well, I will be talking about the film, the plot, as well as all of the science that I think is accurate or inaccurate. So let me get straight into it. At the beginning of the film, there are a bunch of scientists. They're talking about the Mariana Trench. And yeah, it's the deepest ocean trench on Earth, and it's based in the Western Pacific Ocean. And they discuss how they think that below a freezing thermocline, which they assume is at the bottom or the seafloor, there could be warm water below, which harbors a whole new ecosystem. So a couple of the researchers actually set out and they go off in a submarine and they're trying to go as deep as the Mariana Trench to the bottom to try and see if there is this unexplored ecosystem. And so what they're trying to do is go through it, but basically they are just going to go straight to the bottom of the Mariana Trench and keep going and hope that there is an ecosystem because they're funded by a billionaire.
you talk about this thermocline. Is that a real thing? And like, because surely, like you said, the film is based on the fact that there's like a warmer environment. Surely it would just be so cold unless there's like a volcano underwater or something like that. Is that a real thing? Is that kind of what they were hinting towards? Could it create a new ecosystem?
Yeah, good point. So it's like the whole premise of the film is based on this ecosystem being under a thermocline. And yes, the thermocline is a real thing, and it's more specifically defined as the transition layer between cooler, deeper water and the warmer mixed water at the ocean surface. So if we take the top 200 meters of the ocean, this is called the sunlight zone, and it is where light can penetrate, and we have most of the species that we know and we love, like turtles or algae, because that's what I study. And this layer is exposed to the wind and it can become really mixed. And then this thermocline is the layer between this mixed water and the deeper, cooler water. So in the film, they discuss the thermocline layer being at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And the thermocline layers are typically seen in the upper layers of the ocean, but you can actually get them in the deep.
Okay. So how much do we actually know about like the Mariana Trench? And has anyone ever actually been there before? Because I also am thinking the same thing, like, is that possible? Because you're saying it's like the deepest like oceanic
Right.
trench. So, I mean, we think about Ocean Gate, we think about people going down to like even the Titanic.
Yeah, exactly. So the Mariana Trench is 11,000 meters deep, or I know like we're not good with dates, but maybe meters we also don't know. So if I put that into perspective, if we imagine that the deepest point is 2 kilometers more from sea level than the peak of Mount Everest.
Oh my God.
So imagine Mount Everest like turned around in the sea and you're going
And
down.
it's
That's how
still
far.
deeper than that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Since the 1950s, scientists have been using different technologies to survey the trench to measure the depth. And in 1951, echo sounding was used to measure 10,900 meters. But since then, various other vessels were used, such as the Soviet vessel in 1957, and they measured the depth to be 11,034 meters. But then in 1962, precision depth gauges were used and measured 10,095 meters. It seems like there wasn't really an exact depth because all these different vessels use kind of different technologies. But obviously, these were like old school technologies and they weren't sure about how to do it. But there have been a few descents to the trench. And one of them was even the film director, James Cameron. He went in 2012 and he was with the Deep Sea Challenger and he dived to 10,908 meters.
Okay, I actually have a lot of questions because that to me seems so deep. Like I didn't know it was possible that humans could go that deep. Like I thought like unmanned vessels could go really deep, but not a manned vessel. Like how do you like what if the submarine imploded? Can a vessel survive going that deep, especially with a man in it? And like what about like how do you consider the pressure? Because it must be huge at that depth, surely.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And if you're not familiar with it, Titan was a submersible owned by OceanGate, and it was used to look at the wreck of the Titanic, which is off the coast of Canada in the Northern Atlantic Ocean. This vessel lost communications with the mothership, which was within like 2 hours of the dive. And it actually imploded when it was down in the ocean because of several factors like the material, the design, the engineering. But I won't get into that too much here. But if the submersible was made of the right material, then submersibles can go deep into the ocean and withstand the pressure. So I guess if there was an ecosystem below this thermocline that the scientists were looking at in the film, then it could be possible that a submersible would be able to go to that depth.
Oh, okay, that makes a bit more sense. And yeah, the Ocean Gate thing was actually wild. Like I still remember that and how people were like counting down to the day where they would have run out of air and stuff, which was crazy to think about. It's also crazy to think about like how quickly it would have imploded and stuff. Like I saw videos on like it would have happened in like a tenth of a second or something. Everything would have gone into nothing. So yeah, that's quite scary to think about. But it's also interesting that with the given the right materials, you could go like even deeper than that.
So if we get back to the plot of the film, once the researchers get to this barrier or to the Mariana Trench at 11,000 meters, they discover a hidden world because they can actually travel beyond what they think is the sea floor and go through this like cloud-like thermocline layer, and they discover this hidden world. And there are hydrothermal vents, there are crabs, there are squid, things that you would typically see in the deep sea. And that's actually quite nice to see because they were quite accurate with this, that you would expect to see those kind of organisms in the deep sea. And then they notice something very large that's lurking in the water, and it attacks them a few times, and they're a bit confused as to what it is. They do see this giant squid and they think it's just the giant squid, but then the giant squid gets attacked and then they realize, oh, it wasn't like the giant squid that was attacking them, and they lose contact with their mothership. Then they realize it's something huge, and they claim that a researcher or a diver who had been on a similar dive before had seen something similar, but none of them believed them and thought they were just making it up. And it turns out it is a megalodon, which should have been extinct 2.5 million years ago. And so the idea of an ecosystem below the thermocline is big enough to actually house a megalodon is kind of unlikely, but that's what the film is going on.
And then how comes you have they have to get through the thermocline to get down to the Mariana Trench. It's not that the thermocline's in the trench.
So I think what she's trying to say is like in reality, the bottom of the Mariana Trench is like 11,000 meters, but in the film they hypothesized that there was a thermocline at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and then they ended up going through it, and then there was this like new world or something.
Right, yeah, that
or
makes
new
sense.
ecosystem.
Okay, cool. That sounds so interesting. How much do we actually know about the megalodon? Because I had never heard of it until this film. But then I feel like ever since the film, everyone like talks about it all the time, and everyone's always like hypothesizing whether they actually exist. But I actually don't know the answer. Like, do they or not? And also, like, if they do exist, where would we find them? Because you said it's unlikely that they would probably be like where it was found in the film. So, like, yeah, where would they be if they do exist?
Yeah, so the whole point of this thermocline at the Mariana Trench is very unlikely. So it's probably that the megalodon or another ecosystem wouldn't be below the thermocline in the Mariana Trench. But we do know a lot about the megalodon. So the megalodon lived approximately 17 to 3.6 million years ago. And it was an apex predator, meaning it would have been roaming the oceans and eating a lot of smaller fish. And we know that the Meg or the megalodon existed because of the fossil records, in particular because of teeth. So sharks shed their teeth, and so even if we haven't seen the Meg's size, we could date them because of their teeth to gain insight into their existence. And we can estimate that the length of the megalodon could have been between 40 to 60 feet, and it could have weighed up to 30 large great white sharks. So for me, that's sounding huge.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the blue whale is the only marine animal to weigh more than the megalodon. And the blue whale is obviously huge.
Mm-hmm.
So it is thought that megalodons spent most of their time in shallow waters in coastal areas. Again, in the film, they portray that the megalodon had been hidden in this really deep ocean system, but actually they would have been in more coastal waters. And so I think already the film is like lacking in science, because it's unlikely that the megalodon would have been able to survive the deep waters that they're saying. But also a fun fact here is that in the book, the Meg was actually depicted to be pure white, almost luminescent, but it was too hard to do with the CGI for the film, so they made them the same colour as great white sharks, which is grey backs with pale bellies. However, it wouldn't be like this, as those colourings made more sense in an environment with light. But of course, if the Meg had actually been living in the deep ocean, it wouldn't be this same colour as a great white shark. So again, the science is lacking in the film, but
I guess it was a budget film, so they couldn't splash out.
I don't know if it was budget.
Wow, Taz, I feel like you're such a Meg hater.
Oh no, definitely was. That's my personal opinion anyway. But yeah, so they couldn't splash out on CGI. Okay, what happens in the rest of the film? Like, the crew lost contact, they're in trouble with the Meg. What happens?
So the main character, Jonas Taylor, who is played by Jason Statham, he comes to the rescue because that's just like what his character plays, of course. And he helps save most of the crew and get back to the research center. And apparently, when they came up from the deep through the thermocline, they actually enabled a pathway for the megalodon to also come up. And again, this is very unlikely, because if the megalodon had been living at 11,000 meters deep, it probably wouldn't be able to come up that quick or to then the surface water. Like, it really doesn't make sense. But here we go. Budget film, storyline, we're going with it.
I'm really shocked that you guys are saying like the Meg is like you guys really hate the Meg, especially you, Taz. You're a Meg hater.
She's not seen it. I actually really like the film.
Okay, so once the crew, like he's saved the crew, then what happens next?
Yeah, so in the film, they plot to kill the Meg, as they know it's going to cause so much destruction. And at one point, Jason Statham jumps into the water to shoot the Meg. And this part in the film is like so unrealistic, and Taz is going to love it because I'm like, budget film. He jumps in without any gear. He just jumps, closes his eyes, jumps into the sea, knowing there's a megalodon. And then I'm thinking, he hasn't even got a mask, a snorkel, nothing. And I don't even know, but in the film at one point, then he brings out this snorkel or like this mask, and I'm like, You didn't even have that
Where did
5
it
minutes
come
ago,
from?
but okay.
This is what I mean by Jason Statham being cringe, because this is what he always does in films, or like the films that he's in is always like this. It's like, oh, I'm just like a hard action man. I'm just gonna jump in and shoot the Meg. Like, it's
Yeah,
just so
like,
him,
are you
isn't
well?
it?
Because I don't think you do that normally.
Also, like, is your little bullet going to do much to the Meg? Like, surely that would be like us just having a little
Literally.
scratch.
So he's not
Trust.
even trying to shoot the Meg to kill it. He is trying to shoot it with a tracker so that the team can actually track where the Meg is going to be going about his day. And so he's
Sick.
just jumped into the water, and I'm like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like, it doesn't make sense. So again, don't think the science there. Like, would you be doing that? Maybe, maybe not. And so he's just trying to keep an eye on the movement of the shark, and he just goes underwater. And in the film, the visibility of the water is very, very low. I feel like you would have been like, we're not really going to see anything. Why are we going in when the vis is so low? But again, budget film, he's doing what he's doing. And so he did this, and basically he's in the water trying to attack or like shoot the Meg, and then the Meg spots him and comes racing towards him. So the team are then pulling him in, like trying to be like, come back in. And again, he gets in with like just in time that the Meg does not attack him, which I don't know, guys, it's a bit far-fetched, but we're going with it. He's saved. He's back on the boat. I don't know. Maybe I'm agreeing with Taz. The more I'm saying it, it's like, it is slightly budget film.
Yeah, but all films are like
And
this, right? Like, all films, everybody gets away by the skin of their teeth. Like, that is just every single film.
So anyway, he actually got the tracker onto the shark. So now the tracker is live. They can see what is going on. And then the next thing that they want to do is shoot it with poison to actually kill it. And so they successfully shoot this shark and it dies. And I'm not going to lie, but this is where it gets juicy, because this shark isn't actually the megalodon that they'd been spotting. So they realized that there was like multiple sharks, and this shark was a smaller version, but they'd gone to kill it, and there is actually a bigger megalodon out there still.
Oh my god, so they ended up just like letting it go, I guess, like letting it escape. But that just seems so chaotic to me and just so typical of films that Jason Statham is in. But since we were like exposing the Meg, is there any other like scientific inaccuracies that you found with the film? I wouldn't be surprised if there was, because you know I'm a hater.
Yeah, Taz is a hater. So the film actually depicts that the Meg has particular behaviors that are more like the great white shark. And in terms of its metabolism, its energy requirements, it's all to do with like the great white shark. But a shark of the size that the Meg would have been would have evolutionary had to change and had differences in these parameters. But this hasn't been considered in the film. They're just like, oh, let's just take how a great white shark acts and like stick it on the Meg.
Okay, so I guess then in terms of like biology, what you're saying is they're quite different to great white sharks. Is that potentially like one of the reasons that, for example, like megalodons went extinct and great white sharks haven't? So in other words, like, what do we know about why they actually went extinct?
That's a good point and a really good question. So in the ocean, there were cooling events that happened during the Pliocene period, and this is a reason for their decline because food sources could have become very limited in this period. And it's worth noting that they would have laid their pups in shallow coastal waters. So obviously in the film, they're acting like the megalodon had survived in 11,000 meters deep, when in reality, the megalodons were able to survive in like coastal shallower waters, and they would lay their pups in these shallow coastal waters. And during this cooling event, it would lead to ice formation in these areas where they would have laid their pups. So it would impact them on like laying their pups and their reproduction. So this could be like make their birthing area like unsuitable, and hence like leads to points of their like extinction.
Okay, so I guess everyone's main question would be, obviously, the whole basis of the film is that the megalodon existed and was hidden in a secret ecosystem. So what is the likelihood that that has actually happened and it's still around now? Because I feel like the giant squid, right, is this like creature that genuinely does exist. But like there's not much evidence for it existing apart from one that maybe dies occasionally and then washes up on the beach. So maybe that could be the Meg.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint, or maybe it's to make people happy. Like, I'm not really sure. Whatever, like, way you want to think about it. Like, maybe you feel safe that there's not a megalodon like swimming
Yep.
around while you're surfing or
Mm.
swimming. But the megalodon is in fact extinct, and we know this because if it was alive, it wouldn't be hiding in the deep. It wouldn't exactly survive in the cold waters as depicted in the film. And we would see teeth or bite marks on other marine mammals that would give us like an indication of the Meg being alive. Also, what we see from the fossil record is teeth, because sharks shed their teeth. We would have a lot more of them washing up, and we would be able to date them. And the film suggests that the Meg was hidden from sonar detection. And again, like, boats would
Yeah.
detect something of that size. So it is very unlikely that the megalodon has been living in a hidden ecosystem in the ocean and we have just not detected it. And actually, one of the oldest living sharks that we know of is the Greenland shark. And this can live for up to 400 years in the wild, which I think is insane.
That is
And
crazy.
if we put that into perspective, one of these sharks could have been alive during the Great Plague of London, which happened in 1665. And these sharks live in the deep, freezing waters. And I guess the idea that the Meg was living in these conditions could be linked to more of a similar biology to the Greenland shark rather than what they acted like it was more like a great white shark. And so the Greenland shark are one of the slowest sharks, and it seems like they are not only slow in their movement, but they also age slowly because literally, how the are they like 400 years old? And by the way, that is 2 times the age of the longest living animal on land, which is the giant tortoise.
Oh yeah, I've heard about the tortoise. I find it weird that I haven't heard about this shark before, actually. But my question is, like, how do they actually know how old the shark is? Like, was it recorded, or like, surely they didn't start tracking it in 1665? So, like, how are we sure that it's actually 400 years old?
Yeah, so they didn't really put a tracker on it. That's not how they would date a shark or oceanic organisms. But with most sharks, you can identify their age like a tree. So you could use their vertebrae and count the growth bands. However, the Greenland shark doesn't have this because their vertebrae is quite soft. So instead, researchers can use the lens of an eye. So they can peel back the layers and radiocarbon the
Oh
like
my
parts of
god.
the eye, which I think is quite cool. And one thing that is also super cool about these sharks is that as they live in the deep waters, they likely experience temperatures as low as 2 to -7 degrees Celsius. So if they would have to survive, they would have to adapt in that way. And again, in the Meg, they did not talk about any biology of the Meg surviving in the deep waters. So the concept that the Meg survived, like, it's just kind of dumb, like it wouldn't happen. But the Greenland shark actually have adapted to freezing waters. So they have trimethylene N oxide, or TMAO, and urea, which function
Oh my
as
god.
antifreeze, so their body doesn't get ice crystals building up. And so, living at such depths, there is no natural light available, so they can't rely on being able to capture prey. And they actually have these copepod parasites on their eyes. And you know how I feel about bugs and stuff, like it gives me the heebie jeebies, but they actually are pretty much blind because there's no light. They've got these flipping parasites in their eyes. They just have to navigate, like, and hope for the best. So again, the megalodon, if this was real in the film, you would have a species that would probably be a little bit more representative of the Greenland shark. And the Greenland shark is known for being slow, lazy, blind, rather than what the film depicts the Meg to be like the great white shark, where it's actively hunting people. And so, again, like, the science of the film is pretty inaccurate, but it's nice that they've like shown the megalodon and how the Meg, an extinct species, could technically be around and like what destruction it could cause.
Interesting. So I feel like a running theme we've seen with all of the films that we've covered so far is that there seems to be like a blend of real science and then just utter bullshit, to be honest. So yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
But my view is that I would say, from what you said today, I would say that The Meg is probably the most inaccurate film that we've covered so far. Like, there's so many aspects that are wrong. Would you guys agree or no?
Yeah, I think I would agree.
Yeah, I think the whole point is that the megalodon wouldn't still be alive, but like it's cool to think if it was alive, what would happen? But again,
Right.
if it was alive, this isn't what would happen.
Yeah.
So,
And then if we think
like
back to
Taz
the
says,
Jurassic Park episode, I guess like we could never bring the Meg back to life either, right?
right.
So it is like, yeah, I don't know, Taz, you're looking like left to right. Is that right or no?
Well, I guess we summarized at the end of that episode that if there was like a living ancestor of the animal that had gone extinct that was fairly close, then it could be possible to edit the DNA of that living ancestor to be more like the animal that went extinct. So obviously I'm not going to use the example of a great white shark because you said that they're not alike, but if there was a shark that was like a closer ancestor, then maybe we could bring it back from extinction in like some kind of way.
Don't you need a source of their DNA? So you need like a source of megalodon
Yeah.
DNA. Yeah. Interesting.
I didn't know if that would be possible, to be fair.
No, and why would you want to bring back the Meg? Just this
wouldn't.
like apex predator living in the sea. I just don't think it's good.
Also, going back to the Greenland shark, I've actually seen a picture of them, and you know they're like 400 years old. They literally look 400 years old. They look
Oh
like
my
they
God, do
shouldn't
they?
be a functioning animal because they look so old and like
Oh,
decrepit.
stop. They're like the grandpa sharks.
They are.
I'm going to have to Google it.
Yeah.
Google it.
Okay, well, thanks, Yaz. That was so interesting. And I was really excited to learn and hear about the Meg because I actually did enjoy the movie. So, yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And as always, if anyone wants to read further on any of the science that Yaz has discussed today, you can find all of the links to any relevant science in the episode description below. And please don't forget to comment on today's episode and let us know what you think. Do you think Meg is a budget film or not? And did you learn anything new, interesting from today's episode? Do let us know in the comments. And a heads up for next week's episode, we are going to be covering Interstellar. It sounds like a daunting task, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, it is. But I'm ready to break it down for you. So that's what we're going to be covering in next week's episode. But for now, let's get on to the laboratory section of today's episode.
Yay. Okay, guys, so for today's laboratory, we have another polls section.
Yay.
So we wanted to get you listeners
Lovely.
involved in this week's laboratory. So I asked you guys a few questions, and so I'm going to be asking the girls to answer the questions first, and then we'll go on to the general consensus from our listeners. So the first statement is, I've cheated on a test, and the answers are hee hee, maybe, or no way. So have you guys ever cheated on a test?
I actually don't
you're
think
giving
I
that
have.
look like you so have.
Oh my God, I actually don't think I have because I'm like too much of a pussy. Like I was always too scared that I would be caught. But Yaz obviously has, judging by her laugh.
I know the theme for this series is called Exposed, and we are just meant to be exposing the science of films or TV shows, but here we are exposing my life. Yeah, at school I'd say I was always like more of like one of the high achievers, or naturally, like I didn't really work that hard. I wasn't very academic. I didn't really care about school like that. In Spanish, I don't know why I picked Spanish because I never practiced. I never tried. I want to say
Brit. Like Brits are really awful at learning other languages. Like we
I
are
think
so
so.
bad.
I never did the homework though, so like I don't know why I expected to learn a language like that was.
I was like learning languages at school was just a joke. Like, it wasn't actually
It was like the
taken
fun class.
seriously. Yeah, like, it wasn't taken seriously by us because it wasn't taken seriously by our teachers. Like, it was just a laugh. It's bad.
Yeah, so it was a class test, and it obviously was just in the classroom. And our teacher, we had some like naughty kids that had to sit in a different room. So the teacher kept going in between the classroom and this other room to check on the other student. And everyone would, when the teacher left, like everyone would just like get up in the classroom and like go over to the bookshelf where they'd had like their book, like their textbook or whatever, like open on the page of like helping them write out their essay in Spanish. People would literally write stuff in the dictionary and then like pick that dictionary because you were allowed a dictionary. And I literally also, like, other people had the exact like piece of paper with their essay that they'd pre-written because we were told like what we had to write about, and then they would like have it underneath the paper that they were writing on. So they would just like when the teacher left the classroom, they would like get it out and like copy it. And I basically did that too. So I just took in a piece of paper that had my essay on. It wasn't intentional. I didn't expect to cheat, but it was like the teacher wasn't there, and then everyone was like talking. Everyone was like, oh my god, write this. And I was like, bro, I'm just gonna get this sheet of paper out because I don't know what's going on. So
yeah,
bad.
one of
I
my friends
regret
did
it.
that exact same thing in her like language class. I think she literally took her pre-written essay for her like writing test and just like copied it off. And then one of my other friends, she also had a dictionary, and she wrote in like the binding, or like right near the binding of the dictionary. So if you open the dictionary just normally, you couldn't see it, but if you like stretched it open, you could see the sentences that she written.
How do you write that like small? Or
I don't know, because she must have been like reading the dictionary the whole way through, but apparently it worked. So
that sounds like more effort, to be fair. Like, I didn't intend to cheat. It was just that I had the piece of paper because I was just trying to recite what I was saying. I think it was an essay. Like, you had to write something about like what you'd been up to on the weekend and doing all these things. And I knew most of it, but my grammar wasn't great in Spanish. So I literally was just
yeah.
like, whatever. I think I got like a B.
Yeah, I think I've definitely cheated in like class tests, especially if I was like sat next to my bestie or something. We would be like comparing answers like in the back of the
So a couple of
classroom.
my friends cheated like in some GCSEs, and the way they did it, probably a bit controversial, was they figured like if they just wear a skirt and write on their thighs and then
Oh
go
my
to the
God,
toilet
yeah.
and just like pull up their skirt and read what's written on their
That's
thighs.
clever.
Because it's not like any of the teachers can be like, lift up your skirt, because then you'd just be like, oh, you weirdo, why do you want me to lift up my skirt? That was like the idea behind it, which is pretty bad. But I know a few people who did that and were successful. So there you go.
Yeah.
Not that we're, we're not trying to give you new ideas to cheat, but.
And I feel like our listeners also cheat because 65% of people said that they had cheated on a test versus 35% that hadn't. And we also I asked for people to send us in juicy details if they had some.
Yeah.
And we got one message that said, was in grade 10 during quarantine. My teacher sucked at teaching over a video call. So me and my 3 friends were attending class and reteaching each other after each call. We were all failing and just decided to do our online tests together and saved each other's marks. Haven't done it since, but I don't feel bad about it. Yeah, I mean, quarantine was a rubbish time, so
I don't blame you for that one. If the teacher's bad, you gotta team up.
Yeah.
Help each other out. Okay, next one.
Okay.
What's the next one?
Up is I can separate work life from life in general. What do you guys think to this?
I'm very good at this. Yeah. I just clock off. I'm out.
Yes. We all know the answer to this, but
work is life.
No,
That's
it's not. It's not.
Life is work.
God.
It's
work
absolutely not. And if that's how you think, then you need a mindset change.
It's not how I think. It's just how work comes into every aspect of things I do. I think it's just with the PhD.
It is how you think, because I could easily like let it have the same effects on me. I mean, I do appreciate that there are some circumstantial differences, but like for the most part, like for the most of us, it is a mindset thing.
But I think in academia, like you be in the shower and you're like, I've got a really great idea for an experiment, or that's what I would do. Like I'll wake up at night and I'll be like, oh,
but that's not stress, is it? That's just thinking about work.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be stress, right? It's just like associating the work-life balance, or like you keep work-life outside of.
Oh my
God,
God,
I do think about my research all the time.
I think this is what I've learned from the podcast, is that we're all so different, because I'm actually with Liv on this. Like I can switch off from work so easily. Like I feel like as soon as I walk through the doors of being at home, I've just left that stuff behind me, you know. Obviously if something really bad happened in the lab or something really stressful happened at work, then obviously that might feed into the evening where I'm like telling Kieran about it or something, or stressing about it in that sense. But like day to day general work stress, like I switch it off.
For me, I think it's because I have like hobbies that like consume my thoughts after work. And if I didn't have like pole or the gym to go to, like I don't think I would be the same. So I think because like I love pole and gym way more than I love my job. Not that I don't love my job, I just like them more.
Yeah, obviously.
Like I'm excited to switch off, and I'm excited to like just get rid of work out of my head and just focus on something else. So maybe that's part of it as well. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't think, like, you know, being able to switch off, whether you can or can't, it's not there's no right or wrong thing to do.
But going to our listeners, 35% said that they can keep work stress as work stress, whereas 65% said, nah, I can't separate the two. So the majority of the population are with you, Yaz.
Can I say something controversial?
Yeah.
Which is like the people who said yes, like who said to that poll, like they can't separate, like when you really deeply think about it, like are you actually unable to separate it, or is it just that it's like a trend and it's kind of like a rite of passage in academia that like you have to be super stressed?
No, but I do think like with a creative, like in the creative sphere with like experiments in academia, you are constantly thinking about your research because your research does become life, and that's why academics tend to work a lot. Because
I think like Liv's point is that it shouldn't become your life, and I agree with that point. Like, yeah, you can.
No, I get it shouldn't, but I think it like just naturally happens when you're invested in your research.
I think for a lot of people, like that's not actually the case. It's not, and I think for a lot of people, they feel like it has to be the case, or like they're not like a true academic, or like they're not going to be successful in academia. Like just like, no, you can be successful in academia without thinking about it, and like you're allowed to switch off. And I almost feel like it's actually thought of as a negative thing to like switch off.
Yeah, like working long hours and being so hardworking and being so passionate about academia to the point that it like encroaches your evenings and your spare time, I think is so glorified, and it really
that's what I'm saying. That's exactly the word I'm looking for. It is glorified, exactly. And then it's like if you have an opposite opinion, it's almost like people look at that as a bad opinion, and then it becomes this whole competition of like who's working more, who's more stressed.
Okay, let's move on to the final one, which is a bit more fun, a bit more uplifting. And the statement is, I've never fancied a colleague. So what? And the answers are nope, never, and I actually have, to be honest. So answers.
Okay, so when we say colleague, are we talking about like people specifically like in our like bigger jobs where we're working in science or tech, or are we talking about like retail jobs that we had when we were younger? Because Taz works in Hollister, we discovered. So Taz definitely. Yeah. I mean, I dated someone that I worked with, so like obviously, yeah. But in like my career in like science and tech, no.
I haven't. I feel like my field is quite like female dominated, especially like where I'm at now. A lot of people around me are like doing their PhD are women. I haven't found anyone at work that I'm like.
What about before this work that you're in now, like any other previous jobs?
No, I think I like to keep work completely separate to personal life. Like I have friends that
contradicts everything you just said.
Okay, in terms of men, I would not date someone at work. Absolutely not.
Guys, I've done it and I highly advise against it.
I thought you were going to recommend it. I was like, absolutely
No.
not. There's no way I'm doing
Yeah, I thought you were going to be like, and I highly recommend, guys.
Taz, what about you? I feel like maybe you'd have had a cheeky little romance or a crush.
Not in the science sphere, not at all.
Because don't people have like work boyfriends, work girlfriends?
Yeah,
yeah,
work
like no,
wives.
it's like a work husband
Age
and a
mates
work
or
wife,
whatever.
yeah. Which I think is kind of cute, but that doesn't mean you fancy them. It just means like, yeah, I don't know how to explain that. If you don't know what it is, look it up. Anyway, yeah, I've definitely not fancied someone in the science sphere like whilst I've been in that kind of job. And I know you said Hollister, like I worked in Hollister. I mean, yeah, obviously all the guys would fit in Hollister, but I wouldn't say I necessarily had a crush on them. But I used to do, well, I still am a qualified swimming teacher. And there was one swimming teacher when I was at uni. And he was a bit weird because he used to walk around like barefoot, like outside. I went to uni in Brighton, so like people were a bit weird and a bit hippie, but he was just a bit of spice, to be honest. And I would always like hope that he was on my shift whenever I was doing swimming teaching, but literally nothing happened. Like, and he just disappeared off the face of the earth.
So none of us have had we're literally all answering no to this. I mean, other than like previous jobs, like in science and tech, no.
Nah.
What did the polls say?
The polls say 40% said nope, never, and 60% I actually have, to be honest.
Wow. So it's actually like more have had a crush on someone. I wonder how many of them is like in science and tech, like professional job.
Yeah, and actually then formed into a relationship as well. Because I think it's one thing like having a crush, and then I think it's another thing like acting on it as well. We actually got a message for this as well, which was actually quite sweet. So someone sent in, I fancied a guy when I was working at the Students' Union in uni. We ended up starting to see each other and had to keep it a secret for ages from everyone else at work, and we're still together now and have moved in together, which is so
my gosh,
cute.
That is cute.
I feel like the secrecy aspect is so fun. Like I've had a few friends who've like got in like relationships with people at work and then had to like keep it a secret from everybody else.
Oh my god, that's adorable. And I love people sending us in like their little experiences.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that concludes today's laboratea. And don't forget that if you have a story that you want to share with us, you can use the anonymous link in today's episode description. And in next week's episode, we will be covering the film Interstellar, which we are so excited for because, again, it is such an iconic film. Until then, we hope you all have an amazing week, and we'll see you guys next week.
You've been listening to the So Cultured podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Make sure you listen in next week for more science and tech updates and the hottest laboratea.
You can stay up to date with us in between episodes by following us on Instagram and X at So Cultured Podcast.
See you back here, same time next week.